Hey guys, got Bear down here. He's just chilling. Angel's over there. Okay, it's getting pretty close to dinner time, so they're paying attention. But anyway, guys, I want to do a video on some things that you lose when you go with good subwoofers. Now, I'm going to tell you right away, you don't lose a whole bunch, but you do lose some certain things, and I'll tell you what those things are. Now, one thing that you don't ever lose out on, you don't ever go backwards on, at least in my experience, is going duals. Duals you will just gain. You'll gain output, you'll gain, you won't have Swiss cheese bass, all that stuff. So it looks like Angel's getting up. I'm in trouble now. But anyway, so what do you lose? Well, a lot of stuff, a lot of music and stuff like that have been recorded using, well, maybe not recorded, but kind of tuned for basic subs. And basic subs have this response peak that goes, up to about 50 hertz, and then it starts to go down, and then, it goes in the tank. You start to, it starts to taper off quickly. Some better subs will go to about, 35 hertz and then start to dip. Subs like these are the PB2000s, also the PB1000s, pretty much all of the SVS ported line, and a lot of the other subs that I put on the website on the best subwoofers list. They all have more of a flat response. Now, SVS is known for having a super flat response, right? But so when you go to a sub that has that flat response, okay, what actually ends up happening is it actually goes up a little bit, and as it goes louder, as it goes deeper, it goes a little bit louder, and which I really like. I like that response curve a lot better, because as it gets deeper, it gets a little harder to hear. So it just sounds, I don't know, it sounds beautiful in my opinion. But so you go from this thing that goes down like this with a normal subwoofer into more of a flat curve, and then right at the end, right about 20 hertz, it starts to dip. Okay, with these subs, it doesn't start to dip until about 14 hertz, and that's when it starts to dip. But up until that point, it's pretty much getting louder as you go lower, which is what makes these subs so popular. But so if you're used to subs that go like this, come up about 60, 50 hertz, and then go down like this, when you adjust those subs, you're adjusting this curve instead of this curve. Okay, I don't know if that may be kind of hard to explain, but if you're adjusting a curve like this, that's shaped like this, you're always going to have this peak up in here and still nothing down here. So your 50 hertz is going to sound great, but your 30 hertz is going to sound It's not going to be anything, right? It's just going to be it's going to be breathless, which is something I hate, which is why I started the channel, right? So you get a flat subwoofer curve, or kind of angled up, and what happens is these songs that you heard that were used to this curve hit really hard when they're up in the 50 hertz range, and then didn't hit hard when they're down the low end. When you go to a flat sub, those songs that you're used to hitting really hard in that 50 hertz range now just sound kind of right. They don't have that big old boom up in the 50 hertz range. And so that is something that you miss, because there are some songs, I think Beastie Boys' Intergalactic is pretty big right in the 50 hertz range. I think, I'm going off memory here. I'm really bad about that. I should be better prepared. But there are certain songs that if you're used to a subwoofer curve that's like this, and you're used to that big old bump right at 50 hertz, and now it's like this, that song's not going to sound quite the same. It's not going to sound bad. It's just not going to be as boomy as you're used to. And boomy being the key. Those subs were booming. They boom really high at 50 and have nothing in the basement, right? So that's something you miss, is that response in that range here. It's not going to be as loud there. But the secret to that is, if you're flat now, you can adjust the subs up a little bit, and it's not going to be way boomy up here. That bump in the curve is not going to be way up there. Instead, you're just going to be up more linearly. So you can have more bass with a flatter subwoofer. So, but you can miss that. And that's another reason why some people have told me, well, I've compared, a PB1000 to I'm trying to think of like an Acoustec or something like that had no DSP. And said, wow, this other sub was a lot louder. Well, yeah, depending on your content. If you're listening to a content that has that peak right in the 50 hertz range, 50 to 60 hertz, yeah, it's going to be a lot louder than the sub that's flatter, because it's got that in my view a flaw. It's peaky. It's a very peaky sub. It peaks and then it dips. Okay, so that would explain why some people have had that situation where they've compared one sub next to another, and they'll give the lesser sub a better rating. And in my view, that's all about content. That's all about what you're playing through it. That's going to make that difference. If you had played deep stuff, if you had played, something like Cosmos, or some deep, heavy, West Coast rap, or something like that really goes down deep, there's going to be no contest. An SVS sub is going to outperform a typical sub because it's going to go deeper, more in the basement with more authority. It's going to be a clear winner. They go much deeper. But if you're comparing, like I said, Beastie Boys Intergalactic, and you're just comparing that 50 hertz range, and I say 50 hertz, and maybe 55, maybe 48, I don't know, but if you're comparing against that range, that's what you're going to notice is, the other sub's going to be louder. But louder isn't necessarily better. And that's another thing too. I'll go into another video, but when it comes to the subs on the best subwoofers list, max output, max SPL, it's almost something I don't even consider anymore. It's an important factor, but really I'm looking at other things first, because when all the subwoofers on my list, they're all capable of doing ear damage. Okay, none of them are weak, and so that's no longer important to me. It's more about, will it be able to fill the room and stuff like that. And yeah, max SPL is important, but again, the curve is more important. You may be able to get more out of a subwoofer that has a flatter curve than a subwoofer that does more output that's in a curve like this, because again, you're just measuring the peak of that curve. You're not measuring what it does down at 25 hertz. All right, so that's one of the things that is important, is not just max SPL, but how flat the curve is. So let's see what else. I think that pretty much covers it. So I think really the trade-off is worth it. I think losing some stuff that's really boomy in the 50 hertz range, not getting that so much, I'm all right with it. I like being able to hear all of the bass really deep and stuff like that. And another thing I'll point out is that I've come across a few negative reviews of some of the subs that I've reviewed, and almost all of them are in single configurations. Almost all of them. I haven't seen any negative reviews about subs like these that are in a dual configuration and people are still saying, it was missing something. It's the dual subs that make it not miss something. You don't get that Swiss cheese bass. But anyway, I want to talk about that because some people will experience that. Some people will experience, like I said, certain songs don't hit as hard as they used to, or as they're used to having them hit, because they're used to subs that, have that peakiness. And if the song you like has peaks in that range, it's going to sound a little bit different. It's not going to sound bad. It's not like these have no bass in that 50 hertz range. They sound great, but they have more in the deep range. And so there is some slight trade-off. I don't think the trade-off is negative. I don't think it's bad at all. I wouldn't trade it at all. But there is that adjustment. I think what it allows you to do is hear the song more accurately. It's more true to the actual recording, because when you've got a subwoofer that's peaking real hard, and that's not really doing the song that much justice. Whereas a flat curve, I think pretty much anyone will agree a flat curve is better, but you do miss some things. So anyway, guys, now that I've beat that subject up to death, I'm gonna let you go, but thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, put them down below, and please subscribe.